Good afternoon, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all of the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, I will call the meeting of July the 4th, regular council meeting to order at 4:01 p.m. And we will begin with the adoption of the agenda. Administration, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
There is nothing additional from administration.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Council? Seeing none, then we are looking for a motion. Councillor Hawes. Let's try that again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda for July 4th, 2023.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawes. Council, any discussion on that? Seeing none, the motion is in front of us electronically that we adopt the agenda as presented, and I will also look for the mayors. All those in favor, please vote for or against. And Mr. Mayor, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. We will move on to our council minutes for adoption, the regular council meeting of June the 20th and committee of the whole of June 27th. Looking for adoption, or are there any questions or issues with those minutes? Seeing none, then we are looking for a motion to adopt. Councillor Labarge.
Move to adopt the minutes for the regular council meeting, June 20, 2023, and the the committee of the whole meeting on June 27th, 2023. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Seeing none, we will call this to question that council adopt the minutes from the regular council meeting of June the 20th, 2023, and the committee of the whole meeting of June 27th, 2023. Please vote electronically. And Mr. Mayor, in favor? Oh, we have you logged in. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that is carried unanimously. Okay, and we are on to Citizens Minute with Council. This is a minute where folks from the community can come up. It's not an interactive back and forth, but where you have a minute to talk to council about maybe what your thoughts or your concerns are, and we can hear them in this venue. Jen, do we have anybody electronically today?
No, we don't.
So I'd invite anyone from the floor if they are looking to have a minute with council. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We do have a delegation scheduled for today. Section 5.1, the community grant program presented by the Hinton Grant Funding Advisory Committee. And we would like to invite Mr. Mike Story to come up and speak to us. And Mike, I will get you the delegation mic. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Your Michaels, Deputy Mayor Magoon, and Council. I'm here representing the Hinton Grant Funding Advisory Committee for the 2023 spring intake. We are sorry for the lateness of this recommendation coming. We had our first meeting in mid-May. And unfortunately, with the wildfires, we didn't have our second meeting where we heard delegations in front of the committee until June the 22nd. And then we had our final evaluation meeting on June the 27th. So it took us quite a while with the problems in getting everybody together. You've been given the package in regards to the committee's recommendations. We did have 5 members. Unfortunately, one moved in between our 2 regular meetings. And they're listed within your package. Cadence Regioni, Beth McCallum, Jan Van Boosbooten, and Natasha Thones. Our objectives are to provide recommendations to council in regards to one-time projects and operating expenses that are only in developmental stage, and the events that are primarily designed to the general public that attract visitors and contribute to the local economy. Our responsibilities as a committee are to review and rank the applications received and make recommendation to council in regards to the evaluation of those applications. As you can see in the report from the committee, we did have 10 applications, of which 1 was deemed ineligible because it was a duplication of funding previously received. And the second was deferred to either the fall 2023 or the spring 2024 intakes, as the project doesn't have to be completed until the summer of 2024. Finally, the 8 projects were evaluated and ranked or weighted and then ranked by all 4 committee remaining members. And then those 4 rankings on each project were averaged to form the priority in regards to the grant. Keeping in mind that we had to there was 61,000 approximately in applications initially. And to keep it within the $30,000 budget of the first intake, we then ranked them based on priority and then multiplied them by 57% to get them down to the $30,000 budget. And those are included in your package. From Hinton Rescue, SPCA, Adult Learning Society, Daycare Society of Edson, the Hinton Parents for Play Society, the Rotary Movie Presentation Society, the Historical Society, and the Wild Mountain Music Festival. And with the rankings and reduction to under $30,000, those were the numbers that we came up with in your report. So I would now take any questions the council may have.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I will go to Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for your work. My question, I'll go back to the what these projects are for. One-time projects, operating expenses, events that are primarily designated for general public that attract visitors, contribute to the local economy, and promote volunteerism. I just wonder, there's 2 projects that attract visitors, promote the local economy, and promote volunteerism substantially with thousands of people. And those are the Hinty Movie Theater presentation, which brings 7,000 people a year to the Performing Arts Theater, and the Wild Mountain Music Festival. So they seem to match the objectives quite well with how they're described in this document. Why did those 2 projects receive such a low ranking? I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong. Perhaps it's the ranking system. I'm not trying to imply anybody did anything
A
wrong.
lot depends on the evaluation criteria as adopted by council by policy. In some cases, some of the applications received a lower ranking because of their already available funding that they have for the projects. So then their need for the municipal funding was therefore reduced a little.
Councillor Taylor?
As somebody who's worked with this ranking system, can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
As somebody who's worked with this ranking system, would it be fair to say that fair to say or not to say that the evaluation criteria match the program objectives quite well, or don't match them, particularly attract visitors, promote the local economy, and promote volunteerism?
The
Do these
committee-
criteria seem to do that?
In some manners, our committee did have some lengthy discussion in regards to the evaluation criteria. And we did talk about there could potentially be changes in that policy that take other factors more heavily into consideration. Not all of them equal when it comes to 20% for each one. We had discussions that maybe one or two of them might be ranked at 50%. But in most cases, they did meet the criteria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any other questions? Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon, Mr. Chair. Historically, when we've gotten the community grant application presentations, there wasn't, in addition to the name of the applicant, there was a really high level, it's not even a blurb, but like a title for what the project was that they're engaging in. That's one of the things that I noted that was missing from it this year. And for me, that's something that I find helpful in gauging what Councillor Taylor was referring to about whether it matches up with the program objectives and helps to align with council's strategic plan. I'm not sure if we can get an overview of what these different projects were, and moving forward, if that could be included with council's package.
Administration.
Thank you, Chair, to the rest of council. If I could turn to possibly Gary or Jen, whoever is controlling the slideshow, to possibly bring up the presentation or the slideshow that was identified. We did have a brief description of what the projects were on that. I believe it was the second last slide.
If I may,
Please.
in addition to that, can we get a little bit of a description of what that is, though? I don't know what the lost or found project is. Is that possible?
Admin.
Yeah, through the chair, is administration prepared to speak on the individual projects and what they're proposing?
Application itself.
Through the chair to the rest of council, is that something you were looking to have provided at this meeting currently or for a future meeting?
If I
Councillor,
may,
please.
it would be helpful if we could go through it today. If it's too much trouble or the information's not there, I understand. It just for myself, it helps make a decision about how well the program is meeting the objectives in awarding the funds that are available, especially in a situation like this when there isn't anywhere near the amount of funding as there is to match the request.
If we were to, through the chair, to Councillor Ostashik, I don't have the resources in front of me to accurately reflect the project's descriptions to the extent that they should be for this meeting today. However, this can be noted as for future projects that beyond just the project name and the type, that a brief summary should be provided along with this. we could do it today. However, again, I wouldn't feel super comfortable that I did the each project justice by going off of memory. But how do you?
Yes, the committee does exactly that, and a lot of the applications are very, very lengthy. To put the whole application process behind these recommendations, I think Alexa's point about providing a smaller summary of them at the next intake or something could be valuable to council members.
Councillor Stashik.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Taylor.
There were only two that were kind of confusing as to what they were anyways to me. Can you provide a sentence or two more about what those are? Like the lost and found project and the repair and maintenance thing? Not a lot of detail, just in general terms.
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. I wouldn't feel comfortable going off of memory. There's a lot of work that goes into all of these projects and a lot of details that I would be afraid to omit by accident and not do these projects justice. There's on a high level, a summary could be provided, but again, it wouldn't do these projects justice as there's many steps and pieces to each of them.
I have the mayor next. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question that was asked a few times to me in the last few days was, can you give a high level description of the Daycare Society of Edson and where those funds go specifically? And again, not in extreme detail, but something about where those funds get allocated.
Mayor Michaels, I'd like to defer that to Alexa. She has a better memory than I do in regards to what each project entailed.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Michaels. For the Daycare Society, the maintenance would be, the maintenance and repairs would be on the equipment that they currently have to salvage the furniture and toys and other equipment. And the replacement would be for the things that cannot be salvaged, like bookshelves. It's bookshelves and toys and cleaning supplies and furniture, but it's not limited to that because, again, I don't want to summarize this project without it in front of me. But it is along those lines of the repairs are for things that they are able to salvage. And they have a code that they are to follow as well as a daycare provider.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
The only other thing I'd like, I don't know if this is the best path forward, but I do agree with Councillor Stashik and others perhaps who spoke about having that background information. If there are any timely ones that, 2 weeks makes a difference, I would be fine approving them. I would like this to come back with just a paragraph summary for each, for us to do our due diligence on our side, because we have the ability to fund certain projects, perhaps more or less, and we can't do that if we don't have that background information. Generally, the recommendations I follow, but our responsibility is to make sure to tweak it if there's anything. So if there are timely ones, I would support moving those forward if that's possible. I don't know if the committee could speak on that, and then I can make a decision on a potential motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Your Worship. One very timely one is the application by Wild Mountain Music Festival, which is occurring in about 2 weeks.
Mr. Mayor, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I'll wait momentarily.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'll withdraw. I was going to mention that they,
CAO.
Through the chair, if it would be acceptable to you and the rest of council, if we could possibly postpone this or move the action item on this to the end of the meeting, and that may give us enough chance to at least pull the applications. We can provide a brief high-level summary and come prepared with that. I think we should be able to pull that in a pretty timely manner.
Okay, so the request is to move action item 6.1 to 6.8 or 6.7, pardon me. Just shuffle everything else up.
That's correct. Yeah.
Council, we'll deal with that in a moment procedurally. I would like to just finish with the delegation. And when we get to action items, I'm certain that's something we can do. We will go to Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Perhaps that information, if council wants to go that route, will help enlighten me a little bit. But I'm still a bit confused too. I had questions about the Daycare Society of Edson. I actually don't know who that is. I don't know what they do in the community. Can we elaborate a little bit more on what they do in Hinton? I'm assuming they do something in Hinton, in addition to what Ms. Wade already communicated.
Perfect.
Mr. Chair, if I could give that one to Ms. Juke. I believe she has some
Certainly.
details on that group.
Ms. Juke?
Thank you. The Daycare Society of Edson is a somewhat confusing name because it is a nonprofit society that operates daycares in Whitecourt, Edson, and Hinton. The Hinton daycare is operated out of the Recreation Center, so we're quite familiar with it, but it is a nonprofit, and the project is actually specifically for the Hinton location of the daycare.
Okay, thank you. That's very enlightening. Then I didn't realize the Daycare Society of Edson ran the Hinton daycare. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, do we have any other questions for our delegation? And then we'll deal in a minute with the order of the agenda items, the action items. Councillor Ostashik,
I do have some additional, if I may.
please.
So the recommended amounts this year are partial funding for pretty much everything that applied, which is a bit of a departure from what we've generally received in the past. Couple things. I'm wondering, is there a reason that the committee went that way rather than full funding for some of the applicants? And then part B of that question, is there any constraints on the group's abilities to actually finish through with their projects, considering that they're only receiving partial funding? In other words, are they relying on full funding to be able to complete the project? I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, Councillor. We weighted the applications and then ranked them. But seeing that we did not have sufficient funding for 100% funding for all the applications, we then went solely based on council's policy of weighting and ranking them to give them as much funding as we could out of the one draw. There is an administration report that you'll deal with later that provides two other options, being to give away the entire $60,000 budget in one sitting, or to prorate it down to a level that there would only be roughly $7,000 left for the second intake in the fall of 2023. We then, based on our ranking and weighting, did decide that it was best to divide the funds between the organizations that had applied and not give away the entire funding, as there was no way of knowing how many applications would be received in the second intake in the fall of 2023.
Please.
So this year we were faced with a different situation than what we're usually that we usually have. This year we had a high amount of interest with applications that were eligible and a lower amount of funds available. In the past few years, we've had triple the amount of funds before, where we were able to adequately provide the funds, full funding to projects. And then with projects that have been decreased, with the interest being decreased in the last 2 or 3 years, this hasn't been an issue this prominent yet. So with this year, with how many applications that were eligible and with the high ranking of them, we did realize that if we were to, with the recommended action, if they were to receive partial funding from us, we have informed them of the Yellowhead County Community Grant. And if they received partial funding from their home community, which would be our grant, that they would be eligible to apply to receive funds from the Yellowhead County Community Grant as well. So with this in mind, with partial funding from our end, with over, I believe, over 57% for each of the projects, they would be able to apply to the Yellowhead County for the rest of the funds, as they can be granted equal or less than what they have been provided from their home municipality.
Councillor, does that answer your question?
If I could just add.
Oh, please.
This was my second intake. My first was last fall. And if you remember, I think we gave away $14,000 because of the 30,000, because we only had 3 applications. So it was easy to give each group their total request because there was a lot of funds available within the intake. So.
Councillor?
So there is still the outstanding part of the question regarding with any of those groups were consulted, that if they only do receive partial funding and understanding there is some additional funding that may be available through another grant, if they're going to be able to complete the project or not. My concern is granting partial funding to a group to take on a project and they're unable to complete it without full funding. And then that leaves them in a position where they've received a grant, but they can't actually put it into action because they need all the money or they can't do the project. So that's my concern. And part of the question was, were these groups specifically asked if they received partial funding, could they proceed or not?
Councillor, none of the groups were specifically asked if it would delay their project if they received partial funding. As you note, one of the criteria is their need for funding. And in the evaluation process, and then providing their financial statements for the end of 2022, it was deemed that most of the groups did have sufficient funding to fund the entire project if they didn't receive 100% from the town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have myself up next. I guess the question remains, and I apologize if I missed it in the report. Who are the two groups that were identified that didn't receive recommendation for any funding?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It would have been the Wolfpack Football Association and the Community Garden.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any further questions for our delegation? Mr. Mayor, I can't see your face at this point in time. I just want to double check with you. Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and going through our list of questions. And this will be up on the action item list. I can't promise the Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think that when council endorses a fall or a spring allotment, one of the things they're endorsing is the specific projects. And that may speak to either getting a more detailed description like we're going to get at the end of the meeting, or it may speak to giving one or two or even some of the projects a little bit more from the fall allotment so that they can be more successful, because that's what I think we're endorsing. We're getting behind these projects. And I think doing both those things will do that more for us. Thank you very much.
Council, do we have any more questions for our delegates? Seeing none, then thank you so much for coming out and spending some time with us. Thank you. And then I am just going to start with our CAO. So CAO, you are comfortable with the request to move action item 6.1 down to the end, and then we'll bump everything up 6.2. That's your request?
Through the chair, yes, that'd be my request. I think we can have some more details that'll answer council's question by doing that.
Councillor Hawes.
So just procedurally, then would I move to table this? Which would then bring it back later in the meeting?
Administration procedurally.
And if I may, just because we have approved the agenda as is, if that would be the right procedure?
Through the chair to the rest of council, yes, I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay. So I'd like to move that we table 6.1, action item 6.1.
Okay. We'll just make sure that Jen has a second to capture that digitally. Okay, digitally, council, you should see that up right away. So Councillor Hawes has made the motion that council move to table 6.1 community grant action item to 6.8 of the agenda. Council, is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call to question that council move to table 6.1 community grant action item to 6.8 of the agenda. Please vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So we will move on to action item 6.2, council procedure bylaw number 1153 review with the RFD administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn this one over to Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you, Your Worship, Member of Council. This item is before you this evening as we're looking for appointments to the members of the Procedure Bylaw Review Committee. It is in the tactical plan for 2022-2026 that council wishes to have their procedural bylaws reviewed on an annual basis. And according to the Review Committee bylaw, members of the Council Procedure Review Committee must include one appointed member from council, the mayor, and one appointed member from administration. In the recommended action, we are recommending that Charlene McDougall, our Legislative Services Clerk, be the appointee for the group. And with that, I'll leave it for any questions.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks. I'd like to make a motion that council conduct a professional review of bylaw 1153. I can speak to that when it's up there.
Sounds good. We'll just wait. We'll make sure it's captured the way you intend, and then absolutely.
a professional.
Councillor Taylor, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, this doesn't preclude any other motions following this. But the reason why I make this motion is that I was the one councillor from Hinton that went to the AUMA session on parliamentary procedures. And at that session, there were a number, there were a parliamentary expert that was speaking on parliamentary procedures and council procedures. So in Alberta, there is a Parliamentarian Association of Alberta, and there's even one in Canada. And these folks during their session at the AUMA spoke and offered a number of practical suggestions for improving procedures that seemed like they would be ideally suited for us or anybody that's doing that, to get a fresh set of eyes from the outside looking in at what we're doing. Rather, I mean, this would supplement our committee. So rather than have our committee, who's been doing this in some cases for a number of years, do it, we would get a fresh set of eyes from the outside to look at it, offer some hopefully good decisions. And so I think that if we're truly serious about doing this, we would and we want to correct the use of parliamentary procedure and the rules to make decisions that reflect the will of council while protecting member rights, and particularly the rights of those that are in the minority. That would be a good way to proceed. And again, that doesn't preclude getting a committee. This suggestion could go ahead and work with the committee. But that's what I got out of the AOMA session that I attended, because I went up and I spoke to the parliamentary expert after, and he does offer those services to look through our procedures and come up with suggestions and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have myself in queue next. I guess my question for you is there a budget associated, or pardon me, is there a cost associated with that professional reference based on your discussion with those individuals?
I don't have the budget. It would cost for sure.
Yeah, I guess for myself, just to speak to that, I wouldn't be prepared to support that in a regular council meeting right now, not knowing what the budgetary cost would be. I like the idea. I would just need more information before I could support it. I will go to the mayor, then Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't see the motion. Could I ask for you to repeat it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Taylor, did you want to repeat your motion?
Oh, sure. The council conduct a professional review of bylaw 1153.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Chair, I guess my question is this to come back with just some notes on certain sections, or is this to provide a draft update to this current? I'm open to this idea, as professionals probably have more insight than some of the committee members, including myself. So I see some value, but what is our intent with this? And if it's to take the current draft and update it, I think that should be specified. If not, perhaps we create a committee, we create a draft bylaw, then send it to a professional. So that's what I want to work out before I could potentially support this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a couple things. I'm not against the idea of this, but I certainly wouldn't support it, as Councillor Magoon said today. I would need some information on what the cost and time impacts would be in going with this route. But also, as Mayor Michaels said, I would have some questions about how the mechanics of it would work as well. So I guess direct question to Councillor Taylor, does the committee come up with a draft and then it gets forwarded to the professional for their review and input? Or is the professional an active member of the committee? How would Councillor Taylor see this working moving forward?
Councillor Taylor, direct question to you.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would see it as the committee goes. Ideally, I would see it that as the committee recognizes that they don't have the expertise to do a thorough review of this nature. And that they would go out and they would get outside help and they would discuss what they needed with a variety of these experts that consult in this services. And the guy that explained it to me at the AUMA meeting would do whatever you like, but he would certainly be prepared to go line by line through the procedures and offer suggestions on procedure on items that were that he thought that he could offer practical suggestions on, or he could concentrate on aspects of the procedures that the committee wanted him to concentrate on. But it's based on the theory that if you want a serious review of this, you don't get people that have just been working with this for 5 or 6 years to look at it again and again and again. You get somebody from the outside to provide a fresh set of eyes on it.
Councillor Ostashik.
Good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hawes, then the mayor. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not against this whatsoever, but without having clear budget, what that's going to cost, I can't support it at this point. To me, if that's something that we suggest to the committee, that they look into what it could be and the committee bring back, whether it's a report or we even ask administration to bring it back, but without knowing the cost and where the budget, where it's going to come from, I can't say yes to this tonight based on that, but I do agree with the professional review, but I need to know what it costs. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After hearing everything, I won't be in support of this particular motion. Excuse me. I would support a motion to direct administration to bring a report to a future committee meeting on options to amend this bylaw. If that's the case, then we can see it at committee, have that discussion, and see all options and contrast them. So with that, I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have myself, then Councillor Labarge. For myself, I'd like to see the motion tabled. At the very least, it's not something I want to vote against. It's something I think maybe actually has a better chance of gaining the right kind of traction in committee of the whole, where we can perhaps discuss it and flesh it out a little bit better. And go about it the right way, getting the information on costs, proper procedure, what's the best practice. I'd happily support it then. I just don't want to be forced to vote on something where I just don't have important information like the costs. If this is something we haven't budgeted for in this budget session, and it has, a fairly extensive professional cost, I just don't think that would be reasonable to sort of vote blindly on right now. Councillor Labarge.
Thank you. I mean, for me, I think the costs are going to be a few $1,000s and probably makes sense. But I think the cart's before the horse here, because we need to, we sometimes get all bunged up on procedure. And I think we need to come up with a set of processes that work for us and then to have them reviewed. So for me, I just think it's the wrong order of things to do this up front. I'd support this, but I think we need a little more information.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what anybody said, actually. I'd like to withdraw the motion and put another one up. I realize we have to vote on withdrawing it.
Okay, so we have a motion to withdraw the motion on the floor. So we will take this one, Jen. I'll take this one by hand just to simplify the electronic process. Mr. Mayor, there we go. We can see you, council. There is a motion on the floor to withdraw the motion. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. The motion is withdrawn. Councillor Taylor, did you had indicated that you had an additional motion?
I did.
Please go ahead.
That council direct administration to bring back a report on options for a professional review of bylaw 1153 with costs.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We'll just, Jen, we'll give you a second to get that up there. We'll make sure it's captured. We can carry on. Did you want to clarify that, Councillor Taylor? I don't think that quite captures your.
Council, bring back options, bring back a report on options.
For clarifications purposes, that
For
administration.
for a professional report. The council bring back a report on options for a professional report or a professional review of bylaw 1153 with cost information.
Clarification from the chair. Should that not read that administration bring back a report?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, council, that council direct administration to bring back a report. I'm sorry. Thank you for the help. I appreciate it. The council direct administration to bring back, yes. Or that administration bring back a report on options. That's fine.
Okay. Council, any discussion on the motion on the floor? Mr. Mayor, I just can't see you at this time. Any questions, Mr. Mayor?
No, no, I'll put my video on if I do.
Okay, sounds good. Then we'll call this to question that administration bring back a report for options on a professional, on options for a professional review of bylaw number 1153 with cost information. Council, please vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council. There are recommended actions in the queue. Not in the queue, but recommended actions on the report. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chair. I guess I want to turn to Mayor Michaels. Typically, this is something that I think sometimes he makes recommendations on. I'd be curious if Mayor Michaels has a recommendation of who on council that he would see be appointed to this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawes. Mr. Mayor. Oh, you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry. I'll be one moment. I have to look at what I previously had on my list for.
Sounds good. Mr. Mayor, we'll give you a second to pull that up. Council, while the mayor's looking, do we have any additional questions? We can always come back to the mayor. And while he's looking, we are looking to appoint the mayor and Charlene McDougall if it's the will of council. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. Or on this one. I just got right. On this one, before we go with some sort of action. Can we just assume that the committee is not going to proceed until we get if we get a report on options for a professional review, they would at least wait till we get that to make a decision on that. And then if we decide to go with the review, they would wait for that.
I guess I'll go to administration on that for a procedural question.
Because that's the intent of doing the review, right?
Through the chair to the rest of council, yes, if that was the will of council, we can certainly appoint the committee today, but it's not likely that they're going to be active until we bring back a report and decide on the process on how to do a review on this bylaw.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you have the information that you were looking for yet?
Yeah, the last committee had previous counselors on it, so this would be up here. My preference would be perhaps tie this to bringing this back to the committee of the whole to appoint and give me the opportunity to solicit. This was brought before without my recommendation, so for me to do it on the fly, I prefer not to do that. If there's consensus from council that there's only 2 members who want to do this, then we could easily go with that. But since it's not timely and there's nothing to do in the interim, I don't see a point of me randomly picking 2 people's names right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hawes?
With that, and there is no timely, and it will be coming to the committee. I'm going to move the council defers this discussion to a future committee meeting. And hopefully then that's paired with that report on the costs, and we just have it during that conversation. If that's, does that capture that, Mr.
CAO?
Through the chair, yes, it does.
Thank you.
Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to Mayor Michaels or administration or whoever might answer it. I'm just wondering why it would come, especially point 1, I guess all 3 points, why that would come to committee of the whole and not just come to a regular once Mayor Michaels made a recommendation for who should be on the committee.
Administration?
Through the chair to members of council, I'm okay with it going to either one. I don't believe that the dollar amounts we're going to be talking about are going to be all that significant. So I think is just in the sake of time and efficiency, I would be comfortable as administration just bringing this forward directly to regular council if the rest of council is agreeable to that.
Sorry, just to clarify,
Please.
just this motion about appointing the councillors to the committee. The other motion that was already passed about a report coming forward, that I would want to see come to committee so we have an opportunity to discuss it. But in terms of naming the councillors who are going to be on the committee, I think having it go directly to regular is okay. That's generally, if I remember correctly, how it's gone in the past. Mayor Michaels has made recommendations and they've gone to regular for council appointment, if I remember.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Hawes?
So if that's, I'm perfectly fine with just changing the words to discussion to a future regular meeting rather than a committee meeting. That's right.
Councillor Hawes, you see that as a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment. I see that as a friendly amendment. Yes.
Administration, any issues with accepting that as a friendly amendment?
No issues. No.
Thank you very much. Then Jen, if we can just see the current motion, I believe it'll just say defer to, yeah. So council, the current action, or pardon me, the current motion is the council defers this discussion to a future regular meeting. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, we will call this to question. The council defers this discussion to a future regular meeting. If you can vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We will move on to our next action item. Actions, 6.3, the rescind town employees on volunteer fire department policy 067. Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will refer this to Mr. DeBodra.
Thank you, CAO Panasiuk. Your worship, this afternoon for council consideration is action item 6.3. This report seeks to rescind town employees on volunteer fire department policy number 067, which is being replaced by the volunteer firefighter pay directive D2305.1, as it was presented at committee of the whole on June 27th, 2023. Policy 67 is 33 years old and has been replaced by the directive as per the guidelines set by town policies, procedures, and directives policy, and it supports the fire bylaw number 1097. Administration recommends the action is that council rescind town employees on volunteer fire department policy 067. And with that, your worship, I will answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much. Chief, I have Councillor Taylor.
I realize that all we're doing is rescinding the policy 67. However, is it possible to make a motion to add on a change to the directive? I mean, it would seem logical that we could do that because here's a directive that's going to spend a significant amount of town money on an important subject. So we should have some sort of say and ability to modify it if we think that's a reasonable thing to do. But is that part of what I can do here?
Chief?
Your worship, through the chair, absolutely at the will of council.
Perfect, thanks.
Councillor Hawes.
Just a clarification, because I don't see it in the recommendation. So we have a recommendation to rescind this policy. Is there also then the recommendation that we adopt the volunteer firefighter pay directive that Councillor Taylor was alluding to, or is that not for this evening?
CAO.
Through the chair, if I could, the policy was an old 1990 policy that just dictated the relationship between the employees of the town who are also on the volunteer fire department. The firefighter pay directive is an administrative document, directive that would be approved by me as a CAO. It has not been at this time, but it was. So I guess the question just to Councillor Taylor, it would depend on what that is, because we haven't really introduced anything different through that pay directive. But what we've tried to do is codify what we've done in practice for a long period of time to make sure that there's some consistency in how all of our volunteers are paid. So it's not doing really anything different. It's just making sure that what we have is written down on a piece of paper, so everybody is aware of that relationship. The old policy, we have admittedly haven't been following that for quite some time. That's why we think it's redundant, and we want to make sure that before we solidify the directive, we want to make sure that there are no inconsistencies. It's a very simple, this is a very simple policy, and it had to do, essentially all it says is that if you are an employee and you sit on volunteer fire department, you can charge your volunteer pay plus your continue with your town pay as an incentive. Back then, we thought that that was quote unquote double dipping. We haven't done that. That hasn't been a practice that we've used in many years, so we just think it's redundant. But the directive is an administrative document. I would prefer to, if council wants to have a discussion on that, I would prefer to have that at committee.
Thank you. So on that note, if I may,
Please.
I'd like to move that council rescind town employees on volunteer fire department policy 067, please.
Thank you very much. Council, any discussion on the recommended action? Seeing none, I will call it to question that council rescind the town employees on volunteer fire department policy number 067. If you could vote electronically now, please. Councillor Ostashik, I don't, is yours?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have the voting window. I'm not sure why. Sure.
Order, please, gentlemen. Thank you. We will vote, if we could capture Councillor Ostashik's vote, Jen, please. Council, I realize we have 5 of us have voted electronically, but for the sake of Councillor Ostashik, if you could indicate if you were in favor by your hands as well, please. All those in favor, please. Mr. Mayor, how do you vote? Mr. Mayor, and you vote in favor. Carried unanimously, 6. Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, regarding the directive to the CAO, there was an aspect to the directive that I believe is unfair and potentially controversial as it's written. So I was proposing to make a change to that. And that's 5.4.
Councillor Taylor, I'm actually, if I could gently ask if you would like to examine that. That's not on the agenda tonight. The agenda item was to rescind the town employees on volunteer fire department policy. If you'd like to make a motion to examine that in committee of whole, I believe you'd be in order, but it's not on the agenda. The directive isn't.
I would request a vote on your ruling because I disagree with your ruling. It's part of a package that's been handed to all of us. We've got that in the package.
That's
I
fine.
believe it is a fair thing to ask for. All I'm asking if whether we do it now or whether we do it later, if we have the ability to make this minor change.
Okay. Councillor Taylor has asked for a vote on my ruling. So again, I don't believe I'm going to go to legislative on this. I don't believe that's a debatable ruling at this point. I think we just go right to a vote. CAO, is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. If I could have 30 seconds, I could just confirm whether that is a debatable motion or not.
For sure. Council, we will just wait.
Mr. Chair, that is not a debatable motion.
Very well. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I allowed to ask a clarifying question to get administration's legislative input on whether this is allowed?
Yeah, I would believe that would be in line with things. Absolutely.
Point of order. That was kind of what I asked for in the first place when I was told I was out of order. So how can he ask for it when I was told I was out of order?
Then we'll go to again, council, for the purposes of being safe, then we will simply go right to a vote. That way everybody's treated equitably. In this case, we are looking to Councillor Taylor's asked for a vote on whether or not council will support my direction to rule the further discussion out of order. So just for clarification, council, if you were voting in favor, you are voting in favor of supporting the ruling and us moving on. If you were voting against, then you are essentially moving to allow Councillor Taylor to further the discussion as he's requested at this time. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by a show of hands. All those opposed? And that, sorry, Councillor.
I'm sorry,
I had my
I'm confused.
preferences backwards.
We'll clarify one more time.
Please, sorry.
If you are voting in favor, you are voting to proceed with the meeting and move past Councillor Taylor's request for further clarification. If you're voting against, you're voting to continue Councillor Taylor's line of questions.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay. Council, all those in favor, please indicate. Oh, Councillor Ostashik.
My apologies for muddying the water further. Was Councillor Taylor's request, was it for information or was it to make a motion? I thought he wanted to make a motion.
Councillor Taylor, I will allow that clarification as I think it benefits you.
I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
Okay. Council, all those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed. And that is defeated 3-3. Councillor Taylor, you may continue.
Motion if I could, please.
Please do.
Yeah, I'd like to direct administration to bring back pay directive D23005-1 PS for a discussion at a committee meeting.
We'll make sure that that's captured clearly. Administration, while that's being captured, any questions on that?
Through the chair, no questions on that.
While that's being captured, I will apologize, Councillor Taylor, because my understanding of where you were going was a line of questioning in this meeting on the directive itself. So I didn't realize you were bringing forth a motion. So in that case, I will simply apologize. That was a misunderstanding on the chair's part.
No, I believe you're correct. Like I've been thwarted on where I wanted to go. So this is my fallback position.
Okay.
If I'm going to be truthful.
Okay.
Though
Much appreciated.
I like the apology, but thank you.
Then Jen, just as soon as it gets up electronically, we'll make sure that that references Councillor Taylor's direction to direct administration to bring back protective services PS directive as indicated to a future committee meeting. Councillor Taylor, does that capture your direction?
Yep.
Do you care to speak to it, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I believe there's an aspect to it that we need to discuss further.
Thank you very much.
That is controversial and unfair, and that's the aspect that I'd like to discuss.
Okay. I have Councillor Hawes up next. Councillor Hawes.
Just for clarification, so we have the number correct. There's only 10. It's 2305.1. For page directive. Sorry, Jen.
Well,
Thanks for that clarification, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before this is called to question, so I can make an informed decision, I'd like a little more information about why this is coming back to committee as a whole. What would be the purpose?
Councillor Taylor, I think that's a direct question to you, if you care to respond.
sure. I'd like to talk about changes to section 5.4.
Councillor
Can I follow?
Ostashik, please.
Is that's it? That's the only reason?
That's it.
Is it possible to ask administration to speak to it here? The why 5.4 exists, what the reasoning is, what it means? Because it would help me make a decision about whether I think this is worth spending committee of the whole time discussing something, if it's mandatory or relevant or whatever reason. It would help me make an informed decision about whether this should go to committee of the whole or not.
For sure. The ruling was defeated 3-3, so absolutely. Administration, if you would, please.
Yes, to the chair of the rest of council. So statutory deductions are standard. My assumption is that it is in regards to the deduction for the Hinton Fire Rescue Social Club. This is something that the firefighters are able to opt out of, but this isn't a something I think really pushed forward by administration, but this is the firefighters, and this has gone to the firefighters for input. But I would refer to Mr. DeBeaudrop for any other additional comments on 5.4.
Chief.
Through the chair to all of council, yes, that is correct. There's actually two parts to these statutory deductions. The statutory deductions are tax purposes, and there is a voluntary deduction to the Hinton Fire and Rescue Club, the Flame Chasers. They've had this club for at least 50 years, and they collect a portion, about 1% of their income, on a monthly basis. It usually amounts to about $42 that they voluntarily contribute to their club to support their charitable initiatives throughout the town. And that is the whole purpose for that. And they can voluntarily opt out of that according to the law in Alberta for any valid religious or it goes against their moral ethics. They can opt out of that.
Thank you very much.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Please.
With that explanation from administration, I'm not going to support having this come back to committee of the whole. I don't see any reason for this to come to committee of the whole. Statutory deductions or mandatory deductions that the government requires that employers take from their employees and submit on their behalf. And as far as the Hinton Fire Rescue Social Club, that's an action that the firefighters themselves requested and want to put the fund in. And as Chief DeBeau said, they can opt out if they choose to. And if they feel that this directive isn't fair in that they're being requested to submit to the fire rescue social club, they can make a request to administration that be removed from the directive. I don't think this is necessarily something that's either council or committee's business. It doesn't affect the taxpayers. It doesn't affect revenue. It doesn't affect expenses. So I'm not really sure why this would come for council's discussion. And so I won't support it coming back to committee as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have myself. My question is a legislative question for administration. Traditionally, we don't visit as council directives that are admin directives. Are we legislatively allowed to visit directives as a council?
Through the chair to the rest of council. So we can certainly provide the directives, and council has every right to understand exactly what those directives are and our relationship with our volunteer firefighters. Changing the directives gets a little trickier. This one is under my purview. I can certainly, take input from the committee, but this is under the CAO's purview to ultimately approve this. Just for clarification, this hasn't been approved as of yet. It hasn't been reviewed in any detail by myself at this point, but it is. This has been a process that has been worked on by administration for some time. It has been some input has been solicited from the firefighters, but we're not proposing anything different or anything that would require a council or a governance decision.
And I'm going to allow myself a follow-up before I go to Councillor Labarge. Thankfully, this is, I don't think, one of those mountain issues. But if this was one of those mountain issues where you simply had a big divide between council and administration, the CAO in this case, if council fully said, no, we're opposed to a certain item in this directive, do you have the ability with a paid or with a directive like this to simply overrule council? Thankfully, that's not where we're at.
Through the chair, it's loaded, so it depends. But what we're proposing here is a contractual obligation that we've entered into with the firefighters. This is just the first time we've written it down. So there is going to be implications if there is some disagreement, but we would have to have those discussions on the particulars on this one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, initially I never said this was a mountain issue. To me, this was a relatively minor issue. And the proposal that I had was completely in keeping with what the fire chief has just verbally told us. It was merely a suggestion that we add the word voluntary deduction for the fire rescue social club, which I believe is completely what he says, because the wording does not say that right now. And that's great. I mean, the existing fire department might be totally in favor of this, but that's not to say that we're not going to get a fire department member who doesn't want to contribute and doesn't want to attend social club functions. And if he is in any way pressured to make a contribution, that to me would be an unfair and controversial practice. And I believe the wording could better reflect what the fire chief says with a minor amendment. So that's all I was trying to get at.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Labarge.
We've just spent 25 minutes chasing around what's already the law. I mean, whether it's union dues or it's a social committee thing, all employees can opt out. And given that this came from the firefighters, I think it'd be a little heavy-handed to go back and say we need to change. It seems weird to me that we've been here 25 minutes talking about this, so I won't support it either. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you. We've already just had the discussion. Our CEO was listening. The fact that we can't have any control over directives, I'm not going to support the motion as it is. The CEO has heard our discussion. He'll take it into consideration, I'm assuming, and if change the word if necessary. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question and comment. Can this my apologies. Can this directive technically be a policy in the future? Is that possible? I'm sure I'm going to be asked this. at some point, but could this be an actual policy?
CAO.
Through the chair to members of council, I think adopting this as a policy would be problematic, mostly just because it's very in the weeds, which directives typically are, because they're the details surrounding a governance decision. You know, I would equate this to a similar approach to what we took with the pay principles policy, that council had input as to where we place ourselves as a municipality on the market, where we sit from that perspective, looking at this from a high level, but the details of all the particulars, you know, this is really no different than a contract. This is just done a little bit different because we're talking about a directive that or contract that would apply to all of the different volunteer firefighters. So we won't be recommending any specific policy in relation to pay for the firefighters. But rest assured, if there is any decisions or any recommendations from administration that would affect the municipality financially or anything else, that would all have to go through the regular appropriate channels, going to budget, coming to council for any requests that may affect the municipality in that regard.
Mr. Mayor, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And I also won't be supporting this for what was mentioned previously by other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion before we call this to question? Seeing none, then Jen, if we could just have that sent electronically so I can thank you very much. And we will call this to question to direct administration to bring back Protective Services PS Directive 2305.1 to a future committee meeting. If you could please vote electronically now. And that is defeated 1-5 with the mayor, councillors Hawes, Magoon, Ostashik, and Labarge against. Thank you very much. Council, any further action on 6.3? Seeing none, then we will move on to 6.4, tax recovery, designated manufactured homes. Administration, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn this one over to Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you, Council. The report on the tax recovery for designated manufactured homes is before you this evening, as we've reached the point in the process on the properties that were listed on the 2022 public auction and potentially the ones that will be listed on the 2023 auction will require some of the same consideration. We're at a point with the 2022 public auction properties where we need to make the decision to spend additional legal funds to hopefully collect. Often these funds are not recoverable, and the collection in some instances is not satisfactory. We also would be looking at potentially working with the park management mobile park ownership group to come up with some collaboration efforts that would mitigate losses for both parties. Both of these items in writing off taxes or negotiating a write down of taxes are under the purview of council, and which is why the report is before you this evening. Administration is wanting to be very respectful of council's time and is seeking general direction that can be applied in various situations and reporting the final outcome on all of the properties identified prior to the end of 2023. Moving forward on collection could result in additional legal costs, cost of bailiff services, seeking court appointments, eviction, seizure notices, all matters that are very sensitive for council. And it's very important that when we start this process that we're able to do it in a very timely fashion, and returning to council on a case-by-case basis could impact that flow and may result in us having to go back and restart the process in some instances. With that, I will take any questions.
Council, questions? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, I was trying to read, but maybe I'm missing it, but currently we have properties that are incurring penalties at this moment, right? I'm curious as to administration's recommendation on those penalties for the future. Because I realize that, you know, if we're having troubles paying the taxes, are the penalties incurring and racking up, it's getting harder and harder. Is there any plans moving forward, that recommendations that administration has in regards to that?
Administration?
Through the chair to all of council, those properties in the identified listing would fall under Group C.
Okay.
And we are, as I stated before, needing to look at all of these properties on a case-by-case basis and determine the best steps forward.
Okay.
If the property is, or if the owners of the property are committing to a payment plan, we could definitely look to mitigating some of their penalty impacts. But we would be wanting to do that on a very conscious effort that there were good risks to do that. And if there is any penalties defaulted on, or pardon me, any payments defaulted on, then all the penalties would go back and be applied.
Okay, thank you. What I'm hearing is an administration's amenable to discussing with the landowner, you know, what their best options are for both parties. So, okay.
In a very long-winded way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Labarge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So every year we go through this, and it's a process that we don't know what's going on in these individual units that are on this one big large landmass until it's too late. And then oftentimes there aren't sufficient funds to deal with that. So is there a process, and what would it take to actually make the park owners responsible for the collection of the property tax? We don't have to go through this every year.
Through the chair to all of council. So that is in the second recommended action that administration is seeking this evening. The municipality can, under legislation, implement a bylaw, which would then make all of the individual units on the mobile home park become a taxable to the mobile home community and the owner. We are recommending that we bring a report to a future committee of the whole meeting for discussion on this.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Just to clarify, that's what the second paragraph of option 1 means? That's what you're referring to?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question from Councillor Labarge. I'm prepared to, I know it's not in the order, but I'd like to put that motion forward that council direct administration to bring a report on Municipal Government Act Section 304 J2, or passing a bylaw to designate the manufactured home community as the assessed person for all assessed property on the site in a designated manufactured home park. If I could speak to it.
Please.
Yeah, I really believe that some accountability on the owner. I look at this as, you know, potential like a rental. You know, people live in apartments. Yes, they may not pay taxes, but the landowner is paying those taxes. They come out of their purse, out of the rent to accommodate that. I see this as a very similar. And this way, then the landowner pays those taxes and then recoups those costs back to from the property owner. So I'm in full support of this. I think this would mitigate a lot of these problems that we're having and give more control for the landowner as well, because they can jump on this a lot faster than we can as a municipality. So in my opinion, it's in their best interests, and they have more leverage in that regards, and can then take possibly ownership over these before these properties become dilapidated and no longer worth anything. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm absolutely 100% behind supporting the proposed direction. I agree that too many times we've had these come before council where these mobile homes have taxes in arrears, and it winds up being that the taxes that are owed far surpass the value of the mobile home, which causes the problem that the sale of the mobile home to collect the outstanding taxes isn't possible. So the town winds up with the liability and expense of having to deal with it moving forward. I think putting that responsibility onto the mobile home park owners is the beneficial way to do it, not just for the town, but also for the mobile home park owners. They can be much more reactive if they can take action against delinquent pad rent, delinquent municipal taxes, and they can take steps to deal with it before it gets to the state where there's monies outstanding that exceed the value of the property. I think it's beneficial for the town and the mobile home park owners and the citizens of the mobile home parks as well. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Labarge.
Actually, don't
Oh,
think it will-
sorry, Councillor, just give me 1 second.
Thank you. I actually don't think that the park owners care because we keep writing the taxes off so they can remove the trailers. But the other party that is impacted by this are the other taxpayers in town who have to cover off the shortfall each year. And so, yeah, I think it's important. I think we should do it as quickly as we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on the direction on the floor? Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that's my question with this emotion. It doesn't have a date that to administration of bring back report, but I agree with Councillor Labarge. You know, if this is a matter that we've been dealing with for a long time, year after year, and the quicker we can get this in place, the better. So when is administration potentially planning to bring this forward, and do we need a date on it?
Admin?
Through the chair to all of council, administration is not opposed to a date being added. I will clarify that if we want to move on this as quickly as possible, the potential bylaw will have to be before council and passed by December 31st of 2023, because then the bylaw needs to be in effect for 1 year before it can be implemented. So 2024 would be our year of waiting for implementation. 2025 would be the earliest. January 1st, 2025 would be the earliest that this change could take place.
Okay.
You good, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of because what I heard was it needs to be the report, it then needs to go through the bylaw process, and it has to be, if passed, by the 31st. So I guess I'm just trying to think what would be a reasonable time to bring the report back. Then I'm looking to CEO for any direction on this.
Through the chair to members of council, I'll look to Ms. Bourbeau, but I think in September would be an appropriate timeline. Possibly late September if
Well, if I
it's
were to
acceptable.
by the end of September, 2023, that would be suffice. And it can come sooner if necessary. It can.
Through the chair, absolutely. And I'll just clarify, or I'll add on to what Ms. Bourbeau said. That 1 year is actually a legislative waiting period between that year. So, and we would have to start fresh on January 1 of an assessment year or calendar year being Jan 1. So the first or January 1st of 2025 would be the earliest that this bylaw would come into effect.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, if it's my motion, I'd like to add that date if there's no objection to that for the rest of council.
Okay, we'll just look to get clarification that it meets your request.
Yeah.
By the end of September 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Council, any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call the question that council direct administration to bring a report on the MGA section 304 subsequent sections that are identified there, passing a bylaw to designate the manufactured home community as the assessed person for all assessed property on a site in the designated manufactured home park by the end of September 2023. Council, if you can vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, if it's the will of council, there's still one more recommended action. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that council provide administration direction to settle unpaid tax arrears on the designated manufactured homes identified on the attached listing using a combination of external legal services, coordination efforts with park ownership, and write-off of outstanding taxes and penalties, with the report capturing all outcomes to come back to council no later than December 5th, 2023.
Do you care to speak to that, Councillor?
I'd speak to it quickly. I appreciate this coming forward from administration for council direction. I think this is the most responsible way to deal with these tax arrear properties that are referred to here. Yeah, I think it's the best way to deal with them at this point, and moving forward, hopefully something comes of the other motion that just passed, and it'll be the last time we need to deal with this type of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have myself in queue next. Just briefly, I'm certainly in favor of this. I think this aligns itself with some of the previous actions by council in the previous calendar year. I had the opportunity to tour some of our mobile home parks with, in this case, members of the RCMP, who, showed some of their concerns about the safety issues that were created when mobile homes that have lost that value versus what taxes are owed on them, and sort of how that perpetuates a bit of a cycle that is problematic, not just for the community, but also for the people living in that area as well. So I'm certainly in favor of supporting this moving forward. Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll call to question that council provide administration direction to settle unpaid tax arrears on the designated manufactured homes identified on the attached listing using a combination of external legal services, coordination of efforts with park ownership, reinstatement of monthly payment program, and write-off of outstanding taxes and penalties, with the report capturing all outcomes provided to council no later than December 5th, 2023. Council, if you could vote electronically now. And that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Council, anything further on that action item before we move on? Seeing nothing, then we will move on to 6.5, the 2023 amended taxation bylaw number 1178-1, administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will refer this one to Ms. Borbo as well.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. May 16th, the report came to council to pass the tax rate bylaw for the town of Hinton. Council was advised at that time that we were using unofficial rates for Yellowhead County due to an annexation agreement that has been in effect for the last 15 years. The general process is that we pass our tax rate bylaw after Yellowhead County has confirmed theirs, so that we're able to include the correct Yellowhead County rates in our bylaw. Unfortunately, that did not happen this year, and it was noted that if we had any rates incorrect, we need to bring them forward. Yellowhead County did make a change to their non-residential tax rate for the 2023 year. The result is an additional $520 in income to the town of Hinton. And with the passing of amended bylaw 1178-1, we will submit it to the ministry within the required 30 days, and the town of Hinton will once again be compliant.
Thank you very much. I have myself and then Councillor Taylor. Just for clarification, it's going to sound quite funny, I suppose. I believe the indication was there were 8 affected properties. Does that sound correct? And then I have a follow-up with that.
That's correct.
Now, in the report, I didn't see any indication of which properties would be impacted. I don't know if they're business, residential, whatever. Really crazy question. I hope that doesn't apply. If it applied to anyone on council as a property owner, they would be would we be informed prior to voting on something like that? I know it's outlandish, but I would hate to make a mistake like that.
Through the chair to all of council, I do not believe that any, because I don't know offhand if any council is affected. They are annexation properties, notices, and have been regenerated using the correct rates, and the notices were sent out prior to June 30th. Just because we knew that the rates were incorrect, we wanted to have our house in order before the end of the deadline. We've also, will be working with them if they required additional time to pay without penalty for the July, because we're finding out so late. But offhand, if it affects anyone of council, I'm unaware.
I guess I'm gonna explore that just a little bit further. So not to use what if scenarios, what if a member of council was impacted, votes tonight, and then finds out later on down the road that they are actually impacted on something they're fiscally impacted, or they're, you know what I mean? That, to me, that seems like there's a bit of a fiduciary impact there. Isn't that a concern?
Through to all of council, I do not believe it would be a concern, as we are just transferring the past Yellowhead County rates of taxation onto our bylaw for the 2 lines that it requires on the annexation properties. Most of the properties are down the East River Road area. Some of them are just very slight triangular portions of road allowance. The full value of the assessment for the properties is $596,590. So a total tax levy of $3,670. So I don't believe, and because it's in our favor, I'm not seeing where it would be a fiduciary interest.
I'll go to the CAO. Sorry, I'm assuming it's on this issue because I don't want to leave Councillor Taylor waiting. CAO?
Yes, through the chair, this is on this issue. So if we're talking about our legislation, we're obligated for the pecuniary interest. But there's a number of exceptions that apply through the legislation. Now, pecuniary interest is up to each individual councillor to determine whether they have it or not. But just as your CAO, I'll just remind council that there's a number of exceptions to pecuniary interest through our legislation. One being passing something that applies generally to everybody, and this tax rates being one. Now, this is only a few properties, but it still would apply generally to the municipality. And it's my opinion that it's exempt even if a councillor were to live within these boundaries.
Thank you very much, CAO. And Councillor Taylor.
I think you've almost answered the question for me. These are, what type of properties are these? These seem to be the East River Road properties that were recently annexed in the last number of years. 8 properties on the far edge of town that were recently annexed. Is that what we're talking about?
Due to all of council, yes, it's the annexation agreement that went into place in 2009 when there was some development down in East River Road.
So these are properties that are on our property or on Yellowhead County property?
They were annexed from Yellowhead County to
ours.
become part of the town of Hinton, but through the annexation agreement, Hinton agreed to charge them for the properties affected, the Yellowhead County rates for 15 years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. So to administration to clarify, or sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but to speak to Councillor Magoon's concerns about council's involvement with this. My understanding is this has actually been in place for 15 years and that council has in effect approved it every year when they've passed the tax rate bylaw. The exception being this year, it's simply because found out after the fact, after the tax bylaw was passed, that the numbers didn't match. So there requires to be an amendment this year. But for the purposes of pecuniary interest and conflict of interest and anything like that, this is a practice that's been going on for the past 15 years, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council, Councillor Haas?
I'd like to move the council give first reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1.
Care to speak to it, Councillor? Council, any discussion on the recommended first action? Seeing none, we'll call it to question that council give first reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1. Council, if you can vote electronically now, please. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Labarge.
All right, let's move this along. The council gives second reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178-1.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, any discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll call it to question. That council gives second reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1. Council, if you could vote electronically now. And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, I have Councillor Hawes.
Council give unanimous consent to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1.
Councillor Hawes has moved the council give unanimous consent to tax rate bylaw 1178-1. Any discussion? Seeing none, if you could vote electronically now. And that is also carried unanimously. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the council give third and final reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call that to question. The council give third and final reading to tax rate bylaw number 1178.1. Council, if you could vote electronically. And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Any further action or discussion questions on 6.5? Seeing none, we will move on to 6.6, cancellation of July 11, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. Administration briefly.
Thank you, Chair. To the rest of council, we are recommending that the July 11th Committee of the Whole meeting be canceled. As of right now, I believe there's only one item that isn't critical, and it's my understanding that past practice has been that in July we have slimmed down the number of meetings, so we are recommending that it be canceled.
Thank you very much, CAO. And this was discussed with the agenda prep committee as well. And the mayor and myself were both in favor. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we cancel July 11th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call it to question that council if we can just get thank you very much, Jen.
No can work.
That council cancel the Committee of the Whole meeting for July 11th, 2023. Council, if you could please vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us to 6.7, the council workshop, which was originally a notice of motion brought forward by Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor? Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Sure. This is where I just got to ask a question first. This is where I present the motion and we actually vote on the motion.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We do have it up as well.
Sure. Can you put up the motion? Oh, there it is. Okay. So the motion that I'm asking you, I guess, to vote on is that the upcoming workshop that was discussed on May 9th, 2023, the Committee of the Whole meeting be held in Edmonton and or the immediate area. And I have a few words in speaking to that, if I may.
Please.
Thanks. The question is, how much should we spend on outside town travel? In light of recent trips, and now the potential for a town workshop in Edmonton, it seems like a good time to ask what, if anything, taxpayers should contribute to such activities, especially if this workshop for council and senior staff could also happen locally. I call such trips optional because what I'm talking about aren't mandated by legislation nor prompted by some urgent necessity to do town business out of town. And the other point is while this workshop would have some degree of documentation, not all out of town travel is well documented. And now at the May 9th Committee of the Whole meeting, council discussed a weekend workshop to review council priorities that might be held in Edmonton, meaning a travel cost estimated at $8,300. that could be avoided by holding it in or near Hinton. And that would be savings, assuming that we'd have no hotel costs. The question I'm raising is not whether such a workshop is worthwhile. I think that it is. It's whether it should occur out of town in Edmonton or somewhere else far from Hinton or at a local facility. The folks I've talked to wonder if out of town travel is appropriate for 4 reasons. First, results. Is the town getting a measurable benefit from this additional travel that clearly improved our way of life or standard of living in Hinton? Or is it merely a perk of council? Second, is spending tens of thousands of dollars to encourage tourists to come to Hinton through destination marketing initiatives? Surely council should put its own money in local initiatives and less of it, since we would save on travel. Third, especially with the high level of interest rates and other pressures on municipal budgets and property taxes, lower income folks are struggling, and optional travel to Edmonton and other places put unnecessary upward pressures on town expenditures. Fourth, if councillors are traveling for a bonding experience or to become a better team with administration or themselves, one must remember that we are not a team. We were not elected as a team on a shared partisan platform. We do not vote as a team. And the Municipal Governance Act lists individual councillor responsibilities, not joint responsibilities. Sure, we have to act professionally and treat each other with respect, but we're expected by taxpayers to represent them with a high degree of independence and to provide good judgment after sober second thought on administrative proposals, not to say, yes, coach, let's go run with a play that's called. In any case, with the decision looming at council on the workshop and adequate attendance numbers at meetings required by others, I've received, like I said, a fair amount of input on this topic and related topics. So I'm sure it'll be coming up in the near future. So I urge you to reduce such expenditures now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any discussion on the motion on the floor? Councillor Labarge.
Thank you. I guess have more time for the motion than I do for the premise of the motion. There's been all this discussion about all the travel that's happened. Well, councillors actually have a personal development account that all of those travels come out of. I know there was a whole bunch of to-do about the fact that 4 councillors went to Toronto and maybe we'd be better served if only 2 went. And I guess I'm a little confused on, so we all have an opportunity to go to one of those FCM meetings in our term. So over the course of 4 years, I've got businesses to run, and this year worked for me. And I think all counselors have all kinds of things that come up in their life, and they can sort of decide. And then we go to a professional management group that we spend in salary millions of dollars on. And we go, well, we can't spend, and I've heard it's said that, it's $8,300. It's actually not. The only item, unless we came here and we did it in this building for free, the only item on that list that's over and above is $1,000 in travel. So again, if the discussion, I remember when this first came up with council, because there was actually a position from our CAO that said, okay, you know what, we got a new team. I think it's time to go away and actually have a conversation. And then we said, well, yeah, but hotel rooms in Hinton in the summertime are $400. Well, you can go get a hotel room in Edmonton for $175. So if the argument's about cost, I'm not sure how that goes. Now, I agree completely with the relationship team building with council. But at the end of the day, my personal opinion, the number one issue that we had when this council came in was a relationship with council whole with administration. I think that in discussions was far more important than council going away to build a team. So I won't be supporting this. I think everybody's grown up enough to understand the political implications of potentially going away. And I don't think having a place away from where you live is any sort of a comment on if people should come here as tourists. So, I mean, all of that taken together would say, what I would like to see is an efficient, effective, strategic plan. We spend $25 million a year on behalf of taxpayers in Hinton, and to get on the same page and actually decide what we're going to do as a team, the governance side of it and the tactical side of it just makes sense to me. And I'll leave it to my CIO to make that call. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I see your camera on. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my one question to get all the info, all the insight for me to make a final decision is, if the will of council is to continue on to do this in Edmonton, is Councillor Taylor attending? Does he plan to attend if this vote is unsuccessful?
Councillor Taylor, that was a direct question to you.
Perhaps it would depend if there was a sufficiently good reason. A sufficiently good reason would be a meeting with a minister on a topic that is currently directly affecting the town of Hinton. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Mayor, does that clarify?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if I can just share my comments then. I won't be supporting this. The reason I asked this question, it's important to have everyone. And I think if we can strive to make the most out of this, and I think Councillor Taylor's input previously about, amplifying this, session is an important one. So we'll push to meet with ministers. We have huge infrastructure costs coming up in the near future. I plan to push for at least a meeting with a couple of ministers with this new government, and the buy-in of all of council and administration is important. So for those reasons, I'll won't be supporting this, and I look forward to a session in Edmonton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've thought long and hard about this and did even some research on it and the pros and cons of doing a retreat like this and doing it, whether it's in-house or outside of the community. And there was abundant enough information on taking it away from your current location, the change of environment, and it's changed from the scenery and the daily routine, and the amount of focus and productivity that is established. You tend to be distracted when you are in your regular setting. And the fact that, yes, it's overnight and it does have a cost, of course, but if we do it in Hinton, we all go to our separate locations and we do not then bond, build as a team, and we can argue as much as we're a team or an individual, but in my personal opinion, we may not be as a team as a council, but we are a team with administration working together. So that opportunity would be lost, I believe, because other priorities would come up because we are at home, whether it's family things or other things. So I think this is an investment. I've talked to a number of people on this matter as well in the community. Some were not for it. Some majority were for it. As long as it's an investment, as long as we're working together and, striving. And I believe from the agenda, we've got a lot of good things coming onto the agenda that can be discussed and figure out some of the future. Of course, no decisions are being made, but we can get some, ideas flowing. And I agree. I think this is an opportunity for us to meet with ministers going to Edmonton. It wouldn't happen if we did it here. That's a more likelihood if we go to Edmonton. And the fact that we've also now maybe pushing it a little bit further gives even administration more time to make those invitations, and strategically as a council and administration too, talking about what ministers we'd like to meet with. So I won't be in support of this. I think it's a great investment for our community. I think there's lots of benefits from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any further discussion on the item on the floor? Councillor Hawes.
I just wanted to also, and thank Councillor Labarge for bringing up, there has been a lot of talk on costs. And I know that one in particular, there was a training that I went to, but I think it's a point of clarification too, that we have professional development dollars, and that's what they're earmarked for. So, I think if anything, it's being more accountable when we put it into our timesheets or whatever, that's where it's coming from. But I think, again, I feel this is a great investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any further discussion on the item on the floor? Seeing none, then we will call this to question that the upcoming workshop that was discussed at the May 9th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting be held in Hinton or in the immediate area. Council, please vote electronically now. And that is defeated with Councillor Taylor in favor and the remainder against. Council, thank you very much. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out to administration the question. I know that proposed dates were sent for a retreat, whether it was here or anywhere else, but I understand, I think from one of the councillors definitely not able to make those proposed dates. Is it administration's intent to send other dates, possible dates soon?
Through the chair to members of council, the short answer is we're not sure yet. We need to take a look at I haven't taken a look at the survey results admittedly and taken a look at who can and can't be there. I do believe that we couldn't have one. So just we will be taking a look at what else is available to us to try to get as many as we possibly can to be attending those dates.
Yeah. And if I may, one more follow, and the intent, I mean, I again agree with the possibility of having with a ministers at this is the intent to also consider a conversation, and I'll throw this out to the agenda prep committee, to a committee of the whole, to have a discussion as to strategically which ministers potentially we might want to send invitations when we know there's some dates available. Is that possible?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. I can touch base with the agenda prep committee and have that discussion with them, but I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawes. Council, anything further on this item before we go back to action item 1? Councillor Taylor?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, okay, we've got people waiting. Maybe we should proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hawes?
So I'd like to, because it is a tabled motion, I'd like to move that we lift from the table 6.1, the community grant sprint intake.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Council, any discussion on that? And we will capture that just by way of hands, please. And then I'll look to make sure. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, all those in favor of raising the tabled motion, please indicate. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Administration, that brings us back to 6.1, the RFD CGP Spring Intake 2023. Administration.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn this one over to Ms. Wade.
Hello again, Council. I have for you the requested information for the summary, the high-level summaries of each project. I have printed out individual copies and have already provided the mayor with an electronic version. Would you like these?
Please, if you have something to bring to council, yes, please. Thank you very much.
Proceeding on this item, would you like to review this document together, the summary, or go through the report?
If I may, council, I'm actually going to look to some sort of double dip a little bit here into time and understanding we're entering hour 2. Council, if we gave a 7-minute break for biological just give everybody a chance and also to review the document, would that be acceptable? Any major objections? Perfect. Then the chair is going to call a 7-minute break and we will come back at 6:08 and we'll take care of both of those things at the same time. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. Administration, is there anything else that you would like to mention in the report before we turn it over to council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the rest of council, I just would like to point out that the community or the Hinton Grant Fund Advisory Committee did provide the recommended action that is displayed as option 1 with the 2 additional options. And this was to, as they evaluated the projects being fulfilled with partial funding and them not going forward. And it did evaluate having 1 intake or a smaller second intake, as it's not defined in the policies. I think that's it for me. If you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question, because being a member of this committee many years ago, one of the questions that was asked when they had the opportunity during the interview was, if they weren't fully funded, could they still go through with the project? And I heard Mr. Story say that that wasn't a question that was asked, but he also alluded to that that the financials are looked at as to whether or not the project will move forward with that partial funding. So is that the case? Is it a maybe, or is it for sure that if somebody asks for 10,000 and they're only getting 3,000 of it, that other $7,000 can be money is available to them? Or is that part of the criteria?
Ben?
Through the chair to Councillor Hawes, the question being, is it part of the criteria that they can proceed if they have just partial funding? Yeah. That is not a part of the council approved criteria, however, is considered when in discussion around the weighting and ranking criteria. There has been a document provided to the Hinton Grant Fund Advisory Committee with suggested questions that they should, that are recommended from administration for them to be asking. Unfortunately, I wasn't unable to attend the 10-minute Q&A to ensure that those questions were asked, and they are just recommended. However, it is not mandatory. It is not a part of the criteria, but it is questions like that have been created in an outlined and provided to the committees each year.
Okay. Thank you. If I may follow up,
Please.
because I mean, I'm looking at this and I appreciate the fact the committee has done their due diligence and they're trying to fund, the projects. My only concern is whether or not that project, and I know other councillors have also questioned whether or not is this a project that's going to go forward if they don't get full funding, or at least more funding than getting that partial one. So I guess, okay, you've answered my question. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'd like to proceed with the motion if I could.
Please.
Thanks. That council takes $6,000 from the fall funds to top up the allotments for the Hinton Movie Society and the Wild Mountain Festival by $3,000 each.
Okay, we'll just give admin a second to capture that. While they're capturing that, Councillor Taylor, would you care to speak to that motion?
Sure. Yeah, one thing that by and large, I'm not saying that the allotment committee did anything wrong. I believe that this suggestion merely enhances what they've already done. But when I go look at the verbal description of what this funds are supposed to be for, particularly attract visitors, contribute to the local economy, and promote volunteerism, there is these two projects which do that with thousands of people. They do all through three of those things. So that's why I'm suggesting that we do this to enhance that. And the reason I'm not suggesting anybody did anything wrong, like I said, the Hinton Movie Theater does 7,000 people a year. This suggestion that they're providing helps keep their economics going good. If their economics don't go good, they come back to council for money anyways. Wild Mountain Music Festival. Anyways, the reason why this isn't the fault of, I don't think the committee, is that when I look at the evaluation criteria, I see things that look like they're procedurally orientated, not necessarily orientated, things like analysis and plan, demonstration of a thorough project plan. I don't see things that are necessarily geared towards the central premise of what we're trying to do, which is attract visitors, local economy, and volunteerism. If that's the central premise of what we're trying to do verbally, I don't think that the evaluation criteria do that, and I don't think the rankings fully reflect that flavor. And I've done this 6 times, and this is the first time that I've noticed a kind of anomaly between what we got and what the purpose of the program was about. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, or sorry, Mr. Chair. I guess where I'm at with this is I would like to see those as well, but I'm not certain taking away from the fall and taking away that amount of money from the fall. I'd rather have personally a couple of questions about some of these projects. Because I have a couple of concerns. One in particular, and I don't know if administration can speak to this or not, but one of my concerns is the emergency shelter for unhoused individuals. So reading this, this is going to be an apartment that is rented and then is transitional housing. Has that even been, has the group even gone to an apartment building to see if anybody is even willing to, and of other residents have been approached if they've gone to a building that they're comfortable with this? Not saying that anything would happen, but this is that's an unusual thing to go into. If it was my home and I live there and I've got different people coming in and out of it, I know some people have Airbnbs out of an apartment, which is uncomfortable because you don't know who's in there. So is that even a reasonable request? And I realize it's not to the motion, but it'll assist me into making a decision on the motion at hand. So I don't know if administration can speak to that.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to defer to Ms. Duke.
Ms. Jupe.
And through the chair to the rest of council. So I was present at the presentation meeting in Alexis' stead, as she was unable to attend. And the person from the Hinton Employment and Learning Place did present and let us know that this project is actually this program is actually underway and has proven successful. The funding in this case would be an assistance to the program. It's funded through other grant and different associations that the group has already in town. It's successful. They're finding that some individuals are helped better by this than others. But yes, it's established and it is working right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Juke. Councillor Hawes, you're good. Okay, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I can support this request. They're certainly worthwhile causes, but so are the other ones. And without having the full presentations in front of me that I could analyze thoroughly, I find it hard to be able to justify for myself giving additional funding and taking away from the fall intake for the applicant that scored 8th out of 8 and the other applicant that scored 6th out of 8 on the ranking that was done by the committee that council appointed. Right. Yeah, I'm not sure how to move forward with it, but I have some pretty strong misgivings about granting extra funding to those two applicants in particular over the other ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the mayor, then Councillor Labarge, then myself. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this one is not an easy one, but because there's circumstances that I feel are a little bit different than the past, the fact that we've just allocated or the committee recommended to allocate the same percentage of money to all of the groups, the fires, the delay, I feel this is kind of a year where I'm okay to find an enhanced solution to at least help a few of the groups. And one is Wild Mountain, that is timely. And when I look at their list of what they needed for, I'm okay with that. And for Rotary as well, Councillor Stashik brings up a great point. It's tough to go through all and justify, but at least we're honoring the recommendation and going on top. If there's a further discussion to cross-reference every one of them, and we want to spend 45 minutes today, I'm okay with that. But if we're not going to do that, I'll support the recommended action by Councillor Taylor and do what the committee wanted and add the $6,000 to those two groups, 3,000 each. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Labarge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will support this, and my reasons are two primarily, and I think it's the misalignment of the scoring system and the verbal definition of certainly what council's after. And the second thing is how many citizens in the community are impacted by each one of these things. And I think the two that Councillor Taylor's identified certainly impact the most citizens. I guess a third and a finer point is, we've got, no, I'm going to leave that be. So there seems to be a verbal misalignment between the scoring system, what we're after, and how many citizens are going to be impacted. So I would vote in favor of this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Labarge. I have myself next. I'm going to seek some information from administration. Legislatively, does the chair have the right to request to separate the motions?
Through the chair, yes. I believe any member of council can request that the motions be separated.
I would like to separate the motions, please. And if I could, council, I'm actually in support of both. However, I can't be guaranteed sitting here that everyone on council will also support both. And I want to give both of those cases the best opportunity to succeed. But in this case, my plan is to support both. Thank you very much. And I have Councillor Hawes next.
So just to be clear, Chair, you've motioned to split the motion.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm still not totally convinced. I really don't want to take from the fall. I think that it's not the committee went to bats. They looked at their numbers and we've got 30 and 30. They kept it right there. And I think it's not fair potentially to the fall intake groups. My one thing, I guess, and I'm afterwards, what I'm hearing from this conversation is we need to relook at the policy. We need to relook at the criteria. We need to look at all of those things. And that's what I think is the most important thing at this point. And I think by making this motion potentially it's a policy problem and we're trying to fix it with dollars, and then it just takes $6,000 away from the fall intake. And that worries me or concerns me. What I'd like to see is, you know, again, I'm not totally sure where I'm at with this, but before the fall that we relook at the policy and we relook at the criteria and make sure it aligns with what the objectives are of this community grant. And that, you know, because I don't think it's a policy we've looked at for a while, and things change. And so I think that's the bigger issue here. So, but again, I'm still torn taking money away from the fall one. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Labarge.
Oh, I didn't turn off my mic.
Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, Councillor Hawes, I don't disagree with you. I do think that this is an anomaly year. And I think that council approving these things isn't a rubber stamp exercise. And we do have a little bit of flexibility when we do see an anomaly, i.e. the verbal descriptions of these not matching with the rankings, not matching with the criteria. And that's not to say that anybody did anything wrong. So we do have that flexibility. Thanks.
Council. We have no further speakers in queue. Jen, if we could see the first of the split motions, please. And that is that council give $3,000 from the fall intake to the Wild Mountain Music Festival. Council, any further discussion before we call the question? Councillor Ostashik?
I just have a question. I think I know the answer, but I want confirmation. If this passes, it gets added to the general long list, and then this general long list still has to get approved, correct?
Procedurally, let's double check with administration that that's correct. Administration?
Thank you, Chair, to the rest of council. I'm okay with that, but that was going to be my question too, just to make sure that there was some clarity. If that is the will of council, that will change the main motion and we can vote on the main motion, or alternatively, we can vote on the Wild Mountain Music Festival for a total of, I think it was a little over $6,000, but it's up to council. I'm okay with either. Just wanted to be clear on which.
I think from a procedural perspective, seeing as Councillor Taylor made the initial motion, Councillor Taylor, are you comfortable with there being a clarification in your motion that says something to the effect of that council amend the grant spring intake, something to that effect, and then we vote on the finalized version of that? Or do you have another preferred wording? Oh, sorry, let me give you speaking control there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What you want that to be amended to is that council give the Wild Mountain Music Festival $3,000 from the fall intake to the Wild Mountain Music Festival for a total allotment of $6,548.
I think Councillor Ostashik's question, and Councillor Ostashik, please jump in if I've misheard you, is just to clarify that this whether or not this motion will impact the request that's in front of us, which then needs to be approved, or whether this is simply a one-off that will answer both. Councillor Ostashik, is that correct?
That's correct. I want some clarification on if this passes, is that done and they're granted that money? Or if the total changes and it gets added to the full list of requests.
Okay, but are you asking me?
For clarification on your initial motion, yes.
What was funny about that?
What was your intention, Councillor Taylor?
I'm sorry, what was funny? Okay, the intention was that we give Wild Mountain Music Festival an extra $3,000 from the fall allotment. And then we go back to the main request for everybody and we vote on the main request for everybody. That's what I thought would happen.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Thank you very much. Administration, does that now clarify it for you that the direction on the floor is to amend the main request?
Chair, yeah, I'm okay with that as long as council's all on board with that direction. I think if we vote against the main motion, I think that might complicate things a little bit because we are amending a motion that hasn't been put forward on the table. So there might be some difficulties there. I think my preference would likely be to approve the Wild Mountain Music Festival separately, approve the Rotary Movie Presentation Society separately, and then we can make a motion, one larger motion on the rest. Procedurally, I think that'll be a little bit clearer. If we just want to have a motion with everything included, we can certainly do that as well.
Just so I can clarify, and then I'll go to Councillor Ostashik. The request from administration is that Councillor Taylor's motion is actually a finalized motion that does make the decision on the total amount for the Wild Mountain Music Festival.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so council, just for clarification purposes, that is, I use the word contrary, not with any kind of ill intention, but contrary to what the initial intention of Councillor Taylor and the clarification by Councillor Ostashik was. Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if it was Councillor Taylor's intention that the updated amount be considered alongside all the other applicants, could this motion not be just simply worded to amend the funding distribution for Wild Mountain Music Festival to $6,548?
And I will go to the original, to Councillor Taylor, seeing again as it was his original intent. Councillor Taylor, if you click in, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was the way I initially responded to you, that this be modified, that the other part is that it comes from the fall allotment. I thought that was important. So that could be amended to say that council give $3,000 from the fall community grant intake to Wild Mountain Music Festival for a total amount, for a total allocation this spring of 6,000, whatever.
I may, Mr. Chair.
You may, please.
My only suggestion would be instead of saying give, change it to amend,
Sure, that's fine.
because it's amending the amount that goes forward for final consideration. That's
That's
my understanding. That's how, what you're looking for.
yes, please. Thank you for the suggestion.
So Councillor Taylor has received that as a friendly amendment, but we will go to administration briefly. Admin.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I don't want to bog everyone down with procedural items, but I wouldn't use amend either. I would likely say that the recommended action that be put forward include this change. Just because we can't amend something that hasn't really been put forward as a motion. It's just been included in the report. So it's just a slight change, but it's just to include that amount in the recommended action.
Councillor Taylor, are you okay if the CAO works with Jen just to capture that and then we can see if that represents your initial intention?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And while they're doing that, Councillor Haas.
Just a quick, could we potentially withdraw this?
Should we evacuate, Matt?
Yeah. I'm just asking the
Order.
question.
We're going to deal with the safety issue first. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I believe that is an alarm, not a fire alarm.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
To try to, I guess, make this simplified, if we were to withdraw this, there is an intent to make the motion and then we can have two amendments with it that we normally do. And then it just makes it more concise. Is
In-
that, or,
In this instance, because it's on the floor, I
Okay.
want to give administration a chance to hammer out what they think it would look like.
Fair enough.
And then we'll see if it captures the intent of Councillor Taylor. Because if admin agrees that it's legislatively appropriate and it meets Councillor Taylor's desires, then I think we've hit it. And if not, we can always go to Plan B. I don't think that's wrong. I just want to give everyone the chance to hammer it out. Councillor Taylor.
I'm comfortable doing either approach.
Okay, thank you. Administration? Administration, you're comfortable with that wording from a legislative standpoint?
Through the chair to members of council, I'm as comfortable as I can be with that. I think that I think it's fine the way it is. I think that captures the intent of what we're going for, and I think we're all on the same page of exactly what we would be voting for.
Councillor Taylor? Are you comfortable with that wording? Council, any further discussion? Seeing none, then we will call to question that council recommend that the $3,000 from the Fall Community Grant intake to Wild Mountain Music Festival for a total amount of $6,548 be included in the recommended action. We will just get that up digitally. Council, and if you could vote electronically now. Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. So clarification, Jen, if Councillor Taylor, there we go. Thank you. That is carried 5-1 with Councillor Haas against. And then I'm assuming administration will utilize a similar procedure for the second half of the split motion.
Yes, through the chair. That's our intent.
So Councillor Taylor, if you could have a look at the recommended action from administration based on your initial motion. Thank you very much. Council, we have a motion on the floor. The council recommend that $3,000 from the Fall Community Grant intake to the Rotary Movie Presentation Society for a total amount of $6,876 be included in the recommended action. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call it to question. If you could please vote electronically. And that is carried 5-1 with Councillor Hawes against. Okay. Council, we now have some amendments to our recommended action. Councillor Labarge.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question before we go to that. In the report, it talks about these organizations getting 80% of the funding, and then after they give the town a whole bunch of reports, they'll get the other 20%. That works okay if you're a business working for profit, I guess, and you build your profit into when that final payment comes in. But we're already not giving these folks enough money to do the things they need to do. And then they say, well, you can't have the last 20% until you give us all the reports. Reports are important. But if we're going to support citizens going out to do these things, I would like to see them get all the funding we agree to. And then we look to them to give the reports after that. Is this addition of a holdback of 20% new to this process? I never got one when I was doing Wild Mountain, so I'm curious.
Administration?
Through the chair to Councillor Labarge. No, it is not new. And the reporting is one page, which is about, I believe, 3 questions. And it mostly consists of them filing their receipts to get the 20%.
But if they don't have the money to pay for the stuff to get the receipts, they won't get the receipts. I guess from my, well, I would just like to make a motion, please. That get my that applicants to the community grant program receive 100% of the approved funds, reporting to be provided after completion of the event.
While that's being captured, the chair is going to look for clarification to administration. Administration, just legislatively, procedurally, because that looks to change the community grant program funding procedures. Is that something that can be made in council right now? I'm just curious about the procedure.
Through the chair to the rest of council, my assumption is that is actually built into the policy itself for the community grants. Sorry, I'm just looking to administration. That is not included.
Ms. Juke?
Thank you, CEO Panasic, and through the chair to the rest of council. There is no policy. Right now, fully drafted, there are guidelines and there are council approved evaluation sheets, but there isn't actually a standalone policy related to this program at this time.
So again, just looking for clarification, CAO. What I'm trying to understand is that a legislatively appropriate motion that we can entertain right now on the floor?
Through the chair to the rest of council, yeah, I don't have any problems with that motion. You know, typically this would all be built into the community grant policy. If we don't, in absence of that, you know, I don't think that we're married to those processes. But I understand that there's some accountability measures by doing it this way. I also understand that we're dealing with small community organizations who may or may not have the money up front or the liquid cash in order to get these things. So I'm fully in support of that. I think my recommendation would be the next motion would be to direct administration to come back with a policy. And I think we can address, you know, this and other future abnormalities that we might experience with this program.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
I was going to say 2 things. One, that I think we have work to do with the evaluation criteria as well. And the other thing was to help Councillor Labarge, perhaps. You said after the completion of the event, but yeah, when you talked, I thought I heard you said that they get the amount before the completion of the event so they can spend it. Did you mean after or did you mean before?
Reporting to be provided after completion.
Oh, reporting. Oh, I see. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Labarge. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 20% holdback, that's captured in what way currently? guidelines?
Administration?
Through the chair to Councillor Stashik. It is actually outlined to the best of my knowledge in the bylaw number 1085-3, the Hinton Grant Fund Advisory Committee. And I believe it's outlined in the roles and responsibilities section of distributing the funds.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you for confirming that. I did strongly feel it was in policy or bylaw somewhere, so thank you for that. Because this is policy, or because this is bylaw, I won't be supporting this step today. If there's a motion to take a look at policy and bylaw that governs community grants, that's perfectly fine. I'm happy to do that. But for this, I think I'm in favor of letting it stand, as has been historically the case. And the other thing, I don't believe this is new. I believe it's always been the final 20% is paid out upon completion of reporting. It's what provides accountability to the groups who are getting this funding to make sure that they're following through on all the requirements that they need to follow through on for this grant. So that's my feelings on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call this to question. We'll just get that sent out electronically, please. That applicants to the community grant program receive 100% of the approved funds and reporting to be provided after the completion of the event. And I'm just going to give Councillor Haas a second. Logged out, you're welcome. Please vote now. And that is defeated, 2 in favor, 4 against, with the mayor, Councillor Haas, Magoon, and Ostashik against. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and because it was in the bylaw, that's why I voted against it, but I am totally in favor of having this conversation. I think this is again an example where we need to review if we don't have a policy, we need to be clearer on this. So I'm going to hold off at this point, get what is on the agenda, but I'm planning to make a motion so that we can have that conversation for the future. So thank you.
Council? Councillor Taylor.
I might need help here, but I'd like to make the motion that maybe I should have made in the first place. That's that council approve the community grant program funding distribution as outlined in one option 1 for the 2023 spring intake. And do I have to say anything more about the recommended action, or does that speak for itself?
We have the indicated totals there on the page.
Oh, I see. It's got the new numbers. Oh, I see. Okay. That's fine.
Does that accurately reflect your motion, Councillor Taylor?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on this item? Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure what to do with this moving forward, but I'm not comfortable passing it the way that it's been presented. Some of these groups, the recommendation is that they're granted less than 1/3 of what they applied for. And I cannot in good faith pass this without being comfortable in knowing that they're even going to be able to move forward with their projects and programs with that level of funding available to them. The other concern I have is that we've now got 60% of our annual community grant program funding tied up in this one spring request. So that only leaves 40% for the fall. That's a concern too. like I said, I'm not sure what to do with this moving forward. Ideally, I would have liked to receive recommendations that I understand the committee's tack on this was to make it fair and to make it even-handed, but that's not how grants work. Grants are awarded to the applicants that generally have the best proposals, that are going to provide the best benefit, and that are going to get the most bang for the public buck that's being committed to them. I don't feel that's being achieved here. And I've got concerns about that. And I've got concerns about the amount that's being committed to it. So I don't, as I said, I don't see the way forward right now. But I would like to see this revised so that we've got a more equitable amount available for the fall intake, and that we have some assurance that the applicants for these projects that show the most promise are getting the full funding, so that I can be assured that they're going to be able to do their project. I guess the short of that is I'm looking for suggestions, but as this motion's put forward, I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have myself in queue next. I will be supporting the motion that's on the floor. My concern sort of centers around the following is that at this stage in the game, we had our grant funding committee come forward, working within the policy that they set out, or that council had set out. They've done, the best and most appropriate job that they felt they could do. We have a number of different organizations involved in that process that work on timelines outside of council. And what I'm really afraid of is that if we sort of go back and revisited this procedure as a council, we are going to get hung up on looking at procedure, trying to find new and updated criteria for the grant funding program that makes us happy, which I think is good, but I don't want it to hold up these organizations that have applied for the grant funding right now. Now, I will absolutely say that in all my years of working with the grant funding program, this has been the one that has certainly it's felt a little bit different. But I do want to give all these organizations the best chance for success. I think this will do this in the short term. And then from a policy standpoint, we as a council can go back and examine what do we actually want this to achieve, where are the shortcomings, and what sorts of changes do we want to make. So for right now, I'm going to support the direction on the floor in the hopes that we can work on the policy in the long term. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Labarge.
Thank you. I agree with all that, but a question. Do we have any sort of, I think we get far more intake in spring than we do in fall. Is that a fair comment, or do we have any sort of understanding of how that's been historically?
Admin?
Through the chair to Councillor Labarge, just for clarification, you're wondering if there's a difference between number of applications for each intake?
Yeah, I think last fall we gave away half of the money we had available because we only had 3 people apply in the fall.
Correct. There's a few factors that have to be evaluated on this, which is with the available funds decreasing, and last year with the interest being lower, the numbers have fluctuated all over the place. So I really, it wouldn't hold any merit for me to say that fall has more, spring has less, as it has just been fluctuating. The option to include for any changes to the policy for the fall intake would it would delay the fall intake, as we wouldn't be allowed to change the policy as we're receiving applications if that were to change the weighting criteria and the application in and of itself. So if there was changes to the policy, that could also affect the number of applications to the fall.
Thank you. I wasn't suggesting changing the policy at all. I just wondered, I mean, is it not to fund the things that need to be funded in the spring, to save money that may not be spent in the fall just seems a funny way to go. So, but I won't burn up a bunch more time. I agree with everything that Chair said.
Thank you, council. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call this to question.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't look up and see your face. Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, because Councillor Stashik brings up a good point. Let's say Wild Mountain, excuse me, Wild Mountain gets canceled for this year, and it doesn't happen in 2023. Do they keep all of the funds and can use it at their discretion, or is there something within the policy that it comes back to the town if the partial funding they don't use it because on the project that they're saying they're using it? Do we have an answer or an understanding of what happens if they don't do what they do or supposed to do with it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Administration.
Thank you, Chair, to the members of council. So, without looking at the bylaw, I can just say, generally speaking, this is a grant, and they are going to have the same obligations that you would have through any other grant. Of we are providing it for this specific purpose, and we've made it clear even through the application process. So if they don't use the grant funding for, let's say, Wild Mountain for some reason is canceled this year, they would have an obligation to either give it back or to come back to council and say, we would like to keep this money for this reason or for a separate event or whatever the case is. But when we do provide money for these groups, they are required to use it for whatever purpose they've identified through their grant application process.
All right, Mr. Chair, if I may, please. I'll support this. I'll cross my fingers. I do share the same concerns as Councillor Stashik and maybe other members of council, but I don't see a better alternative for this intake. So I hope everything goes smoothly, and I look forward to potentially another motion to bring this to committee for us to have a look and clean this, maybe clean up a few things that we've learned today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Council, any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call this to question. That council approve the community grant program funding distribution as outlined for the 2023 spring intake. Option 1, Hinton Search and Rescue 3109, Hinton in District SPCA 4855, Hinton Adult Learning Society 5258, Daycare Society of Edson 5016, Hinton Parents for Play Society 3495, Rotary Movie Presentation Society 6876, Hinton Historical Society 741, Wild Mountain Music Festival 6548, and the total for $35,898. Council, please vote electronically now. Council, that is carried 5-1 with Councillor Ostashik against. Council, any further action on that item? Councillor Hawes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that council direct administration to bring back a draft community grant policy to a committee of the whole. And before I put a date on that, because what I'd really like to see is it potentially in place before the fall intake. Is that even reasonable? I'm looking at administration because I can't remember when the fall intake happens. I think it's October.
Administration.
Through the chair to Councillor Hawes, it would not be achievable by this fall intake. Advertising has been requested from the public for 2 months, and that would mean August 1st we start advertising. So any changes would we'd either have to delay the fall intake or make any policy changes after this intake.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to let the motion stand that a council direct administration. It obviously is not going to happen for this fall, but I think it's a conversation we need to establish and get in place before next year's spring and fall intake. And maybe if there's an opportunity to have a conversation, maybe some questions that council needs the committee to ask to give some clarity for the future when we are having this conversation, maybe giving some recommendations on those questions. Or what I heard also was the recommended questions, whether they ask them or not, are there specific questions they should be asking, I guess is a better look at it than, because I think there's information that could be got from those questions that can help council. So I'm gonna move the council direct administration to bring back a draft community grant policy to a committee of the whole meeting, to a future committee of the whole meeting, and leave it at that.
If you just want to check it out up there, please, Councillor, we'll make sure it meets your expectations.
Yeah, we'll have to take out prior to the fall intake. And just in regards to the community grant. Draft policy with regards to the community grant, that's all it needs to is the community grant to the committee of the whole meeting.
To future committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Does that meet your expectations?
You can take out the intake. Because it's a policy, that'll include all the criteria and such. Is that correct? Potentially?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Council, I have Councillor Taylor.
Question to whoever can answer it. Apparently there's a Hinton Grant Fund Advisory Bylaw 1083-3. In addition to coming up with a draft policy, would we have to change the bylaw as well?
Administration?
Or should we just have the word bylaw up there?
Through the chair to members of council, I think likely what we'll do from an initial step is get our arms around exactly what we have today, bring that forward, look at the potential changes that likely in a committee of the whole meeting on what committee would like to see as part of changes. And then from there, we would decide on the most appropriate mechanism to bring this forward and regulate this type of process.
From clarification from the chair, you feel that this motion encompasses that then?
Through the chair to members of council, I'm comfortable with this.
Very much. Councillor Taylor, does it answer your question? Okay. Council, any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, then we will call this to question. That administration bring back a draft policy with regards to the community grant to a future committee of the whole meeting. Council, if you could vote electronically now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, anything additional on these action items? All right, and then Councillor Hawes has indicated that he needs to, sorry, the mayor has indicated that he needs to leave. So the mayor, if we can make note that at 7 p.m. he has departed the meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And we will move on to notices of motion. Administration, do we have any notices of motion?
Through the chair, no, we do not.
We will move on to information items, council. And the first and only one this evening is a proclamation. And so we will begin with a proclamation for National Drowning Prevention Week. Proclamation, National Drowning Prevention Week, Proclamation 2023. Whereas the mission of Life Saving Society Canada is to prevent drowning throughout this great country, and even one drowning in Alberta is one too many. And whereas most drownings are preventable in a water smart community, and only through water smart education and a healthy respect for the potential danger that any body of water may present, can we genuinely enjoy the beauty and recreation opportunities offered by these bodies of water. And whereas the Life Saving Society urges Canadians and residents of Hinton to supervise children who are in and around the water to refrain from drinking alcoholic beverages while participating in aquatic activities, and to always wear a life jacket when boating. And whereas Life Saving Society Canada has declared July 16th through the 22nd, 2023 is National Drowning Prevention Week to focus on the drowning problem and the hundreds of lives that could be saved this year. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor, Marcel Michaels, does hereby proclaim July 16th through the 22nd, 2023 National Drowning Prevention Week in the town of Hinton, and do commend its thoughtful recognition to all citizens in our community. On behalf of the mayor, thank you. And with that, we will move into reporting. And we will begin with council reporting, and I will begin to my far right with Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor.
I attended the town of Hinton sponsored Canada Day as a volunteer and assisted with setup. And as such, I got some insights into how hard Don Ingerdahl works. So he did a great job. He added a number of new elements, and he certainly worked very hard for it. So congratulations. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't a big friend this weekend, but it was relatively well attended. The beer tent was kind of crowded. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I will move on to Councillor Labarge.
Thank you. I too attended the Canada Day celebrations, and the new location's fantastic. I think it lays out well there. It was really conducive to live music. Having beer there makes everything a little bit better. But I commend everybody who was involved in the move down there. I think that was a good change. Lots of kids running around the field, and that was a good day. I did on Thursday, though, attend the homelessness initiative presentation of the coordinated access. And it's interesting how prevalent this problem is getting. I mean, there were articles in the Globe and Mail this morning about homelessness and the issues that it's creating pretty much everywhere in North America. It's not a Hinton thing or an Alberta thing or a Canadian thing for that matter. And I would just like to put some kudos out to help in the work that they're doing to bring together some of these organizations that are looking to help to solve this problem. What coordinated access is to link all the agencies that work with the homeless, whether it's addictions, mental health, or financial. How do they communicate between themselves so that each of them knows what's going on with the clients? And so hats off to help and all the work that they're doing in this regard. And finally, I guess, happy birthday to our neighbors to the south. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We will go to Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Canada Day, I got to say, a lot of people I heard from, they really enjoy the new location. And I have to agree. It was a really nice setup. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, the weather wasn't fantastic, but hey, it's Canada Day in Alberta. I do want to though throw out to take a look. So our Youth Advisory Council, they put up and unveiled the murals on the rail car. So as you're driving by the museum, take a look and see what's in the windows of that rail car. And thank you, Councillor Taylor, for coming out as well. But yeah, it's spruced it up, and now it's made where the other areas of that rail car now are looking at what else can they add to it, the door and other things. So, but yeah, that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Hold on a second, please. There we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing additional to report.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. And then quite briefly, it was my honor to attend Canada Day on behalf of the mayor for both the land acknowledgement, the cake cutting, low hanging fruit. Asked a lot of people about what they thought about the change of location. Lots of support. Full stop. Thank you very much. We will go to the CAO. CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything to report at this time unless there's any questions.
Council, any questions for the CAO on their status report? Seeing none, we will move on. We do have a closed, two closed session items. Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move, we go into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, we will call that to question. Council, if you can vote electronically, that we move into closed session at 7:06 PM now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming.